Hello, and welcome to this virtual roundtable discussion where we'll be discussing the evolution of customer engagement. This is one of a series of 3 videos looking at the fast pace of change happening right now in the world of customer experience, the challenges, the opportunities, and the future. The videos, sponsored by Vonage, form the basis of an article in the Future of Marketing and Customer Experience special report published in the Sunday Times. I'm your host, Nick Eason, and I'm delighted to be joined by 5 influential leaders in this space. They are Sunny Rao from Vonage, Mark Smith of Contact Engine, Kat Robinson at Metrobank, Stan Swinton from Deliveroo, and Johanna Schilt from Crew or Livy here in the UK. Let's start with Sunny Rao. Sunny, how will customer engagement evolve in the future? Can you set the scene for us? What are you seeing?
There's a ton of data available today and more being created every day through the breadcrumbs that consumers leave in their interactions with businesses. How do you make data actionable is, I think, the biggest challenge. And to make that actionable with a cohesive or a holistic view of that consumer, and really not to give disparate experiences at different touch points, but a more consistent one end to end. I think Stan touched upon it right at the beginning of the conversation about how they want to have a consistent experience. So I think we're going to see capabilities that are going to be leveraged. And a large part of what we do at Vonage is really provide those APIs to leverage a lot of that data and insight and make them actionable in your businesses. What does that do? It helps you become more proactive. So, companies like Contact Engine leverage that to get more proactive with their consumers, to reach out to them before things happen. That ties down to the whole preventative aspect, right? How do I have more and more sensors becoming more affordable nowadays that are part of your fabric, for example, on what you wear, whether in your shoe, on your watch, in your clothes, and therefore measuring what's happening with you. We're working with companies, for example, that look at human beings. Human beings, 6 billion of them generate a ton of data every morning when they go to the toilet. So how do you actually get data out of that to say, how is your health? What is it that you ate yesterday that wasn't very good? And how do you feed that back into your preference engine, back into Deliveroo? So Deliveroo says, you know what, you shouldn't be eating that next time because you didn't have a great reaction to it. Or how do I get you that physiotherapist very quickly because we think that you have a musculoskeletal degeneration happening, and therefore I need to get you that the set of exercises to help you with that. And how do I connect you with Crew in that model? And then, of course, if I did all of that, then how would I take Metro Bank and say, hey, you know what, here's your insurance policy. It's going to be a lot lower now because you're leading a healthy lifestyle. So I think this ability to federate your preferences in a secure and scalable manner, and to leverage that data to make it insightful, and then to be able to leverage that in the communication to consumers is going to be a large part of how businesses will transform themselves.
That's great, Sunny. And then I think it's a good segue into Mark and Contact Engine because I think what we're the potential for technology, and talk about outperforming call centers now with what Mark and Contact Engine are doing with natural language understanding and so forth. I wonder if you could expand on that for us, Mark, in terms of what you're seeing and what the potential is in the future.
The future is very interesting for us. The advances coincidentally with the pandemic actually, but the advances in NLU over the last couple of years have meant that NLU's extended far beyond Turing test intelligence. So there's conversations you can have, lengthy conversations, which are actually as efficient, if not more so, than human beings. I'm taken though with the notion of data and data lakes and analytics. I think there was a phrase used about a decade ago called, which went something along the lines of software will eat the world. I always found that quite pretentious because I have a PhD in biotechnology, and I'm quite an analytical person. I think maths will save the world. And what do I mean by that? Everything we're talking about, businesses have gone out of their way to collect vast amounts of data, both overt and covert. There's a whole discussion around bias within that data, but I'm a purist around this, right? The data isn't biased, people are, right? But anyway, where I think this next goes is you've got, as Sunny says, actionable insights, and certain areas, when it's a human construct like a bank, there are 300 or 400 different indicators that show the antecedents of a later debt event, right? It doesn't take a lot of thinking to imagine the kind of work that Metro could do to help people early on. I think the world of the biological world, which I used to work in, but got too damn complicated with me because you can never quite work out what was going on. I think that's more challenging because you need more invasive technology. There's lots of stuff you can do on the surface of your skin, but you kind of need to go right into the analytes, right into the body, right into the biochemistry to get the insights that are really, really going to work. So there's a big challenge there, but by no means impossible. Look what we've done in the last 12 months with regards to mRNA and vaccine, just incredible, right? Beautiful. So I think actionable insights, but just do it. Stop talking about doing it, just do it, because it's there, it's happening now. The future's just happened. That's it.
And just do it. Is that a good phrase to use with your business, Stan, and Deliveroo? What are we going to see in the future, and how do you think it's going to evolve?
I think Sunny and Mark's vision of this is quite forward-looking, right? And I don't know that customers today are comfortable with the idea of a toilet that registers my pee data and passes it on to Cat to adjust my insurance premiums. I don't know. I don't want one of those toilets. I don't think we can even get people to install smart meters in the UK. So I don't know. It's I think there's a step ahead of that before that, which is, and Johannes's industry is a little early on the adoption curve, right? But most industries are further along on the availability and selection curve. And technology has really been accelerating that. And what we're seeing is like paralysis from our consumers, right? I'll give you an example. West London today, go on Deliveroo and search for a burger. You'll get over 150 different options for burgers. Like, that's just paralysis. You go on Netflix and you start scrolling. People tell me that they spend 2 hours just looking for the thing they want to watch. So I think we are in a world where we're getting too much selection. The opportunities are too big. And so really the opportunity in the sort of short to medium term is around curation and discovery. Because the other thing that you find is as soon as you put curation in, then you shut down my discovery. And Spotify is like this, right? So you go on Spotify and you get the same thing fed to you over and over and over again because you're paralyzed by the world of selection. So we're just going to keep feeding you the things we know that works. And that's what machine learning does. Machine learning just says, we're going to keep feeding you the things that we know works. But I think people get fed up with that. And eventually I want to try something new. And so it will be both good personalization, curation, but then discovery that allows you to taste things that you otherwise wouldn't, that otherwise the AI wouldn't necessarily present to you, and allow you to experience more of that selection in life. For me, that's kind of the opportunity in the shorter to medium term. And I think we do need to, we need to kind of start to, I guess, understand the needs. Like Mark's need as a vegan, we need to understand those and build those into our experiences. Absolutely. We need to take it actually a step further and start facilitating those things that customers want us to facilitate. So I would love for Deliveroo to help me lead a healthier lifestyle, or I'd love to have my bank to help me, essentially manage my finances so that I had a good retirement. I'd never got myself into too much debt. But I need to opt into those experiences, and customers need to express their needs. As soon as we take away the opportunity for the customer to express the need, that's when we're into a reality that I don't know customers will want to come back from that.
Well, I like your just do it approach, Mark, because in one way the data and technology is already there, right? It's just about taking that and making it to a strong product. I think in many cases, we talk a lot about sort of the data itself or technology, but it's just tools that you can use to build really great products. And a lot of those products can be built on top of what currently is out there. So let's do that. And I think definitely the case within healthcare, there is a lot of data. A lot of that is unstructured, yes, but we structure it and we can use that data to turn the system into be more preventative and proactive. But it's not in the future, there's no need for that toilet, although I would love to have that toilet. Like, there's so much thing that you can do here and now. So no, I like it. Let's do it. Let's bring the future
Can I ask you
faster.
a question, Johannes?
Yeah.
Do you think there's a risk of genetic bias as we use that data to profile people who might have, shorter lifespans or more propensity to be unhealthy?
Yeah, no, there's obviously always risks involved with what you're doing, but it's just about managing those risks. I think that the sad thing within healthcare right now is that there is a lot of data, but no one is really using it. And you don't have to go into genomic sequencing, although that is super interesting, obviously. Rather easy example, we have access to a lot of people's medical records, right? And with your acceptance, obviously. And with that data, we can guesstimate that if you're allergic to pollen. A lot of Swedes have hay fevers, you have pollen allergies, and we also know where you live. And we know if birch will pop next week. So we could easily remind you to start taking your medication this week instead of next week because you will feel better. That is not rocket science. That is here and now. And it's just sort of taking insights that are already out there in the medical records and turning that into a strong product. And in theory, your GP could have done that. Like he or she could have browsed through all the medical records and she could call you and say, I renew your prescription. You start taking this meds this week, and you will feel better next week. But it's just, it doesn't really scale. So I think there's a lot of those kind of opportunities out there where we don't have to go into genome sequencing or just using what's currently out there and turn that into something that is a strong consumer offering.
Isn't that it though? I think it's maybe starting with things that feels kind of credible or comfortable for the customer. I don't know, rather than, I guess, some of the toilet that understands your broader health. Maybe I can see that you'd get there, but maybe starting with information that the customer would be completely comfortable that you have, and just playing it to the customer in a way that feels comfortable. Again, if I think about a banking example, a bank advising you on how to manage your money in months, and maybe starting to think about saving for the future or retirement or what have you, feels fine. Whereas then maybe for some customers right now, stretching beyond that to, what you're spending at the supermarket or kind of other things might feel a bit uncomfortable, even though customers are increasingly comfortable with sharing their data. I think there's still a stretch, isn't there, in terms of how they think the organization they're sharing their data with is using it and how related that is to the thing they've come to the organization for, if that makes sense.
From a banking perspective, Kat, banking is quite conservative, and therefore, where do you see the potential in the future and the opportunities going forwards in terms of what the future might look like and what you could achieve more, either incrementally or in the far future with customer engagement?
I definitely think there's things we could be doing now, smarter things with data to help customers make better choices and be better with their money. So, the example I gave before around indicating to a customer if they're likely going to run out of money in the month, or, a couple of bills that have come in this month have been higher than usual, and what does that mean? So I think there's absolutely things we could do now to sort of nudge and support customers with their money. But then I also think we could think a bit more broadly about how we save the business time, if you like, through use of robotics, etc., to free up time to do more value-added things for customers regardless of channel. So, as I said before, things like helping customers plan for big life events, think about how they manage their money and kind of some of the future goals they want to achieve, that kind of thing, and maybe think a bit more creatively about how we do that in terms of, for example, how we physically use our store space or some of the tools and support we could create for customers in digital channels.
That's great. And now we've got a set amount of time. So I think for the last few minutes, it'd be great to have a little short fire from each of you in terms of what do you think the main drivers in the next 12 months in terms of customer engagement. What should we be excited about, and what do you think the drivers of change are? So starting off with, and I'll run through you all. So Sunny, what do you think?
I think the conversation's been great. Everyone said essentially they're putting the power back in the consumer's hand, with everything that Stan said about curation versus discovery, everything that Kat's been talking about, and what Johannes said and Mark said. We're really putting the power back in the consumer's hand and allowing all the experiences to be tailored to their needs. And in order to really do that, I think over the next 12 months, and the longer this plays out, I don't think by any stretch of imagination we've seen the end of the pandemic yet. So we're going to live through a tumultuous time for the next 12 months. And you're going to see preferences continue to evolve and behavior continue to change. So as a business, there's nothing more important than having the ability to be agile in being able to turn around those experiences and building those capabilities with that agility in mind. And I think that's going to be one key metric to measure over the next 12 months, both because of disruption, also because of behavioral change.
Great. And over to you, Mark. What do you think is going to be drivers of change and so forth in the next 12 months?
Only a fool guesses the future, right? So here we go. I think hyper-personalization is something that's been around for a long time, and that's interesting. And I'm a great advocate for personal, not persona-based communication. But I also think hyper-localization is going to be quite interesting as well. We're at home. We're noticing how big the heating bill is. People are starting to think about ways they might source things locally, food and entertainment and what have you. That's got to be a good thing. I think the notion of what we did in the past, the power stations on the outside, having to go 50 miles into London as I did every day, losing 3 hours of time, winning that all back and making things much more local, personal, going back to sort of artisan pastoral communities. But, you know, I haven't grown my hair this long just because of the pandemic, right? But that's yeah, hyper localization. I'd like to see more of that.
And over to you, Stan. What do you think is going to be drivers of change in the next 12 months?
I think I'd reiterate a number of the themes that have been spoken about. For me, I think certainly automation and data-driven personalization are at the forefront of innovation for customer experience right now. I think something we haven't talked that much about, but I would add to the list, is the idea of building communities around your brands and leveraging those communities and social interaction. I mean, the pollen example Johannes gave was a great one. Instead of the company being the one to tell you that, you need to start taking now your allergy pill and you'll feel better in a week. If a doctor in a community then interfaces with your patients can do that, all the more credible, and you create a stickier kind of community around that. So I think the idea of building communities around brands, around experiences, and doing that within an ecosystem. So we each have our own bits of data, and yes, I'd love to have Kat's data. I'm sure I probably couldn't use most of it legally, but I'd love to have it. I'd love to have telco data lakes. I'd love to have healthcare data lakes. The idea of kind of building end-to-end experiences and ecosystems for customers that really heighten the experience well beyond what an individual brand or proposition can do, I think will be the next wave of evolution beyond that.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Stan. And over to Johannes. Patient engagement, next 12 months, what are the things to watch out for?
Yeah, the drivers of change. No, I think of what we continue to see that the patients themselves, that is the end consumer of healthcare, will continue to drive a lot of change. And we have seen that during the pandemic, and we've seen that before the pandemic, that a lot of what we have done have been in the hands of the consumers. We've been putting our offering in the hands of consumers, and they said, yeah, I obviously want to use this instead of going to a GP practice or an emergency room for that matter. And that is actually something that have been fairly rare within healthcare. It's rare that it's a consumer-driven change. It's usually sort of the system itself that just decides the direction. So I think what we'll continue to see that we will have a lot of consumer patient-driven change in healthcare. And that's, me being a patient myself, I think it's a highly positive.
Thank you, Johannes. And last word from Kat. Kat from Metro Bank. What do you think?
I think probably a couple of things for me. So I think there's something about continuing to give customers choice. So customers have maybe made different choices over the last year or so. As I said up front, I think some of those will stick, some of them won't. But I think absolutely giving customers choice in how they interact with you, and that being seamless, is definitely a thing. I also think we talked about innovation, kind of speed of innovation, 100% agree with that. But I think there's also something interesting around communication and how organizations kind of inform, communicate with, and kind of in some cases protect their customers actually, which is interesting. It'll be interesting to see how that plays through over the next 12 months.
Thank you. Thank you. And is there any last words from everyone? I think we've had an amazing hour, actually. I'm trying to get my head around everything. It's been absolutely fantastic. Is there anyone wants to interject for the last thing, or it's on the 10:30? So And is everyone happy? Put your hand up. Yeah, it's been
Not on the record, Nick, but I just wanted to say that I really respect the brands here today, and I didn't get a chance to say that, but I've interacted with several of the brands here on a personal level and as a consumer, and it's amazing what you guys are doing to really reset the standards on customer experience, change consumers' lives. I think it's fantastic. So I just feel very privileged to be on this panel with this group.
Likewise, and I've interacted with some of you. Some of the brands, I would say not all of them, given where I live in this area, but certainly Deliveroo is one of those that I continue to do. I can't wait for Crew to get into the Asian market and expand into that. There's clearly a large aging population in this part of the world, in many parts of it. So I think, and as banking services continue to innovate with more digital services, what this conversation has brought out is clearly that everyone is thinking about how the future is going to look, and that everyone's committed to doing the right thing, not just doing it for what needs to be done, but for the right reasons for the consumer. And in every conversation, and ending with Kat in this call, was about protecting the consumer. That level of empathy coming through every digital channel, I think that makes a huge difference. And I'm really fortunate to be on this panel with all of you.
That's a fantastic note on which to end this short video. Thanks very much to our speakers for a fascinating discussion. I've certainly learnt a lot. Do click through to the other 2 videos in this series, where we'll be talking about the changing landscape for customer engagement and a look at potential opportunities. Thank you for watching. One more for good luck. Outro, section 3. That's a fantastic note on which to end this short video. Thanks very much to all our speakers for a fascinating discussion. I've certainly learnt a lot. Do click through to the other 2 videos in this series, where we'll be talking about the changing landscape for customer engagement and a look at potential opportunities. Thank you for watching.